Yes, it's a very unusual story, and as news reports are leaking out and more information is coming out, we found out that he ran into legal problems starting back in October of last year. He got into some trouble when he was off base here in South Korea and allegedly kicked a police car, assaulted someone. He was prosecuted in South Korea. He had been fined, and then he was detained on a U.S. military facility, and it looks like they were sending him back to the U.S. for disciplinary action, probably a bad conduct discharge, and he planned to escape, and he crossed the DMZ.
Now, as a soldier, you would have imagined he would have understood the risks of crossing over into the DMZ. If you want to escape, you probably don't go to North Korea.
That's right, but I think he must have been very desperate. And it's interesting that he crossed an area called the Joint Security Area, or JSA, where the inter-Korean talks and the armistice talks are held. The rest of the DMZ is very heavily fortified with barbed wire and mines and so forth. And he actually joined a tour and was in this tour group and then sprinted across. And there were no North Koreans on the side at that time. So it's a very, very unusual case. And there are questions about when he escaped from the airport. He was actually taken to the airport outside of Seoul and supposed to fly back to the U.S. But then he left. He supposedly told the airline officials that he lost his passport, and they escorted him out. And then he joined this tour. But if it was a very short time, it's puzzling because you have to register ahead of time, and you have to give them your passport number, your identification. They clear you and everything. So it sounds like he might have been planning this for weeks, maybe at the time when he got his airline reservation, and then, took this action.
Yeah. Daniel, how complicated is it going to be for the US to try and negotiate his release?
Yes, that's interesting. We'll have to see how this plays out. We could look at other cases that are not exactly the same. I think the North Koreans will try to exploit him for any intelligence value. They will debrief him, but any information that he has, I don't think would be any sensitive information as far as weapon systems, plans, or trainings, or anything about U.S. military or cooperation with the South Korean military, anything like that. But nevertheless, he will go through that debriefing process in North Korea. And then the next step, I think they will try to exploit him for some propaganda purposes, use him for some kind of visual props or maybe statements and press conferences and things like that. And then depending upon his value, which I don't think will be very high considering his rank and disciplinary problems, he will probably be expelled at some point. And the North Koreans, of course, will try to exploit or capitalize on anything that they can as a bargaining chip.
Are there any comparisons to be drawn? I'm thinking the most recent case potentially of an American caught up in North Korea was Otto Warmbier, and that was a story that didn't end well at all.
Yes, that's right. But they're different in many ways because Otto was a college student. He was a civilian on a tour, and allegedly he got into some trouble and had stolen a banner inside a hotel that had references or slogans about the regime, which is a huge political crime in North Korea. And then we could see from the video, the images from his trial and everything, he was very, very distraught, understandably so. But in this case, Travis King, he's a military member and he went on his own. It's interesting because COVID, North Korea is closed and people are not authorized to visit or enter North Korea. So I wonder how the North Koreans will deal with him on that issue as far as quarantining him and the COVID protocols and all of that. So they're very different, but there were other military members going back decades, I think, that are more similar. For example, Joe Dresnok had defected in the 60s. He was an American Army guy who got into legal problems, disciplinary problems. He had left base without a pass, and then in this sense of desperation, he was going to get in trouble. He said, well, I'll just walk across the DMZ. And then he ended up staying there for the rest of his life. So we'll see what happens in this case.
And you talk about the fact that Kim Jong-un may want to exploit him. Do you think he could be used as a form of trophy that he may have wanted to defect to North Korea?
Right, and of course, he has some control over that. So Private King, I don't know how ideologically committed he is to North Korea, how knowledgeable he is about the system, what kind of use or value, what kind of human skills or capabilities that he has personally that would be of value to the North Koreans. I'm very, very doubtful, but maybe he can carve some space out if that's his choice and what he's determined to do. The former or the defectors to North Korea from the 1960s and 70s, that era, they became movie stars. They acted in films and were used for propaganda purposes. They were subjected to all of this retraining and education and so forth, indoctrination with the Kim regime values and all of that. So we don't know what path he'll go on, but my suspicion is that he'll probably be expelled at some point.
Yep.
Once they exploit all of these opportunities.
And of course, it comes at a real low in diplomatic relations because they really are non-existent between the US and North Korea at the moment. North Korea fired 2 more missiles overnight, really angered at the arrival of a ballistic missile submarine in South Korean waters. So this is quite a test for US diplomacy.
Right. North Korea is dissatisfied, a revisionist regime that's dissatisfied with the liberal world order, their vision of Korean governance and how the Korean peninsula should be unified. It contradicts the South Korean vision. They've never renounced the use of force. They allocate a lot of resources to their weapons programs. I was just reading earlier that they've been accused or assessed of stealing about over $700 million in cryptocurrency last year to support these weapons development programs. So they were dissatisfied with the closer cooperation between Washington and Seoul. The nuclear submarine arrived yesterday after North Korea had tested solid fuel ICBM last week, which could strike the United States with nuclear weapons, Australia as well. So this is the response to the submarine arrival and continued training and alliance coordination between South Korea and the United States.
Yeah. Daniel, always good to chat with you and get your perspective. Thanks so much.
Great. Have a great evening. Good to see you again.